From Nashville. I've been in Nashville for the last 2 weeks doing a run of shows at the Ryman with Jason Isbell. We do it every year, like eight shows. So just finished that on Sunday.
It's a kind of a casual, cool thing to just drop in a conversation.
Sorry. Sorry. That's that's what we're coming from. It was fun. I did it last year. I joined him like last summer. So the Ryman run last year. He's been doing it for like 10 years, I think. But I was very new to the band last year, and it was pretty stressful having to learn a bunch of new songs. But this year it was much more chill, which was great. I felt much better about it.
Are you like in the band? How does that work? You're officially part of it. You're shaking.
I'm in
your
the
head.
band, baby. I'm in the
You
band.
are in the band. Oh, you're okay. That was a positive. It's so funny. It's like one of those things, I was like, oh, I'll do some like light Googling and do some research on whatever. Some Reddit post.
Yeah, well, I thought it was obvious at a certain point because, we did some new band photographs and, so there's like a picture of the band that it's, a picture of me and everyone else all over the place. And I didn't kind of realize that people were still, I guess we never officially announced it. But yeah, no one else has been playing bass for over a year. So it's just me.
What does that mean in a situation like that where, it's a musical project that's obviously like very sort of attached to his name? What does it mean to be a part of that band?
Yeah, it is interesting. It's kind of a middle ground between like it being, I don't know why the example that springs to mind is the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but it's
You're in LA.
I guess I'm in LA. Yeah. I'm always thinking about Flea, like just a little bit, honestly. Yeah, so it's not like that kind of equal membership. We all make decisions. It's still like his band, but it is much more of a band than the other tours that I had been doing, which is very much it's like Andrew Bird and whoever his band happens to be, or Jenny Lewis, stuff like that. Where they're changing the band a lot. I mean, this band, the other guys, Will Johnson joined at the same time as me, but the other guys have been there for between 10 and 17 years. So it's very much a band, but yeah, he's, he's writing the songs. Yeah. So it's kind of in this kind of interesting middle ground. But it's cool. It kind of works for me. I don't think I have the like capacity right now to commit myself just to being in like one band. At least a band like that's playing so many shows, but it works quite well for me to not have to write the music and just get to play.
I assume that he tours pretty frequently, though. Does that not take up a lot of your time?
Oh, it certainly does. Yeah. It takes up a lot of my time, but it's, I don't have to make any decisions about anything, I guess. Like emotionally, it's not a lot of, I don't have to think about it that much other than like being there, playing the shows. I don't have to write any music. I don't have any like, financial stake in it in a way, it's not like, it's a little different, I guess.
It sounds like it's a case though, where that kind of the rest of your schedule in a sense kind of revolves around the decisions that Jason's kind of making on his end as far as touring.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's like I've committed to being in that band that is kind of, everything else does kind of go around that. And I'm still kind of figuring out how to fit in my other projects because I do have, some other things going on, but at least Jason's team schedule things pretty far in advance. So, nothing's really being dropped on me last minute, which is helpful. And then the other projects I'm playing in, the other members are also doing a bunch of other things. So it's always going to be a bit of a juggling act trying to play shows with SML, for example. It's, it's hard.
I'm always curious about kind of the machinations. How do you prioritize, and do you need to carve out a certain amount of time per week or month or year to do things that are just purely you?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's been really difficult. And playing with Jason hasn't been like, I've been touring with other bands for the past 6 years or so. So it's not like I've had a ton of time to anyway. But it's hard. I mean, I think things just move at a slower pace. I just put out a record and that took me, about a year and a half to make because I was doing it on the like week I had off from tour every, like once a month or whatever it was. So I don't know. It's just, yeah, it's hard. I haven't found a perfect solution.
You haven't mastered it.
Yeah, no, I haven't mastered it. I mean, I don't know if it's, it's always, everything's always going to be a compromise. I think there's like a perfect situation where you're just like, wow, I can just create exactly when I want to and do someone else's project when I want to. But, I mean, at the moment I've just released a record, so I'm not trying to fit in like working on new music at the moment, which is nice, but I'll start thinking about that soon. And it's just going to take, it's just going to be like, oh, I can put out a record, once every 2 or 3 years, not like once a year, which is also fine with me.
I mean, I suspect for you, as with a lot of people, that having lived through the pandemic and having had moments where you had just absolutely nothing but time on your hand, like this is a pretty good problem to have at the end of the day, that too many people want to call you for work.
Yes, I'd much rather it this way. I've been, even not in the pandemic, just it took me a long time, just in LA to get myself kind of set up to where I wasn't worried about not enough people calling me. So yeah, I'd much rather have this problem.
How do you get your foot in the door? I mean, obviously, you move to a city like LA. It's an industry city in a lot of ways. There's a lot of folks out there, but like, how do you get on those lists?
Just time spent being part of the community, I think. So I don't think there are a whole lot of shortcuts, yeah, it took me a long time. To start playing, and then it took me a longer time to start playing things that I was really interested in. But yeah, I don't know. It was really just like going to a lot of shows, meeting a lot of musicians, playing a lot of gigs at restaurants, and then eventually, after like 5 or so years, enough people would call me. I always kind of thought about it like, as it kind of doesn't matter how far down you are on someone's list, of people they're going to call, like eventually you'll get called for something. And then, and I always just kind of saw that as an opportunity to, like to make a good connection, or just to, I don't know, to kind of like prove myself. I felt a little bit like I had to prove myself, a lot of times. I think it's a gendered thing. For sure in this industry, especially in the jazz world, other people not expecting me to be good at what I do. I think just like other people being, it's happened a lot of time. It doesn't happen so much now because I, have been doing it for longer. I'm also not as young. Like I moved to LA when I was 23 and I probably looked about 15. So I can kind of understand some of it. But there are a lot of times you're playing a gig with someone and they're not very friendly or they weren't very friendly to me before we started playing. And then afterwards, suddenly they wanted to be a lot friendlier. And, I think I think there's definitely a gendered element of that. There's probably like a being Australian element of it as well.
So you got 2 strikes going against you.
I know, right? No, but, I think just I've been in LA for 10 years now. So, it's just been like a lot of time. And I spent certainly like the first 5 years going to a lot of shows and meeting a lot of people and just, I would do much more like playing sessions at people's houses and stuff like that. I don't really have the time in LA, honestly, to do that stuff anymore. But that definitely helped.
Do you feel like that made you push yourself harder? That you had these things working against you, that you had to hustle even more than you might have otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone, honestly, in LA, you just have to hustle. I think it really just taught me more about like what kind of people I wanted to be spending time with and what kind of scenes I wanted to be in. It's not a nice feeling to have to kind of, I don't know, just kind of not be respected in a way, like coming into something. So I think it just kind of taught me like what I deserve in terms of respect, or what everyone deserves in terms of respect. Like I think you should always give someone the benefit of the doubt, right? It's kind of shitty to come in expecting someone to do a bad job. yeah, but people do it,
I see where you're coming from. The gender thing makes a lot of sense. It's very male dominated, to say, even like in Jason's bands, where it's a lot of guys. How serious were you about the Australian thing? Do you feel like that really was something that was working against you?
I don't know. That was a little tongue in cheek. I started off in the jazz world, like solidly in the jazz world, like nothing else. And I do think that, I think, yeah, certainly it's, coming into trying to play seriously a music that's like Black American music as a white Australian person is maybe not questionable, but I think it's something that, I was definitely thinking about, like, what is my place in this music? What, how am I approaching this? What does it mean for me to be playing this music? Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I don't have like a solid like answer to all of these questions, but it was things I've been thinking about.
It makes a lot of sense. And obviously jazz in particular it's a music that when people discuss it, it deals with, authenticity. It sounds like that was maybe something that you struggled with early on. How did you find your place in there? Or did you realize that, like, at the end of the day, that shit doesn't really matter that much?
I don't know. It's something I still feel like I'm in the process of, I don't know if for me it's a kind of something that I'll figure out and then I will have figured it out. I think it's always kind of reassessing like what my relationship with music is, with jazz is. I'm getting a lot of questions around the music that I put out on, like, is this jazz? What does jazz mean? What is, is it time to redefine jazz? I get a lot of those kind of questions, and I don't know if I'm really like the person to answer those. But yeah, I think I've made peace with the fact that, like, I think I'm doing something that to me is interesting and at least is interesting enough to enough other people that it's worth me putting out records and doing it. But it's kind of drawing just from a wide range of different music that I listen to and my own experiences, and it's going to be shaped by being white and being Australian and having grown up there, and then also by, like, my many years trying to play jazz or playing jazz, I guess.
Obviously the racial element isn't there, but a case could probably be made as an Australian coming in and playing, ostensibly country music in Nashville. There might be some kind of disconnect there as well.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I mean, much more, honestly, for me, because I didn't grow up listening to any of that music. A little bit of Americana, but not much. Definitely not really country music, and definitely not rock and roll, which I've been really upfront about. I mean, at the end of the day, they called me or Jason asked me to be in the band. I wasn't going out and being like, please let me join your band. I mean, I'm thrilled to be there, but like it, I think maybe the interesting thing for him is that I do come from a different kind of perspective. I do come from a different range of influences, and that maybe like adds something to the music that wouldn't have otherwise been there. But yeah, I don't know. I found myself, at a certain point, I kind of just decided to say yes to things or like come from a kind of a standpoint of saying yes and trying new things kind of. And if like I don't like them, I can always stop doing them. And the thing with Jason also was supposed to be like, I was supposed to be filling in for 5 shows. Like it was not supposed to be a long-term thing at all. And it kind of snowballed. But, but if it wasn't working, if I didn't like doing it, I would stop.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that, especially in an instance like, maybe this applies to like a Jenny Lewis as well to a lesser extent, but where you, as you said, last year, prior to doing this string of gigs, you were studying the music. That, Jason or anyone who hires you is looking for something kind of specific and is probably looking for whatever your strengths are in the space. But it seems like there's a balancing act that has to happen when you're working with a set group of songs that are already out there in the world.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely true. I think, yeah, finding that balance between what the artist wants and what I want is a skill set. And it's not always, opposed. Like those are not always opposing forces. A lot of the time, in fact, for most of the touring I've done, I haven't played on the records. I've come in to play songs that have already been recorded. So that kind of gives like a good starting point of like, okay, well, this is what, the artist wanted in their recording of this song, and how, like, what, then listening to it and kind of trying to decide for myself what parts are important, or what parts do I think are important, what parts do I think I can have some liberty with. And then, usually it's a collaborative process. I mean, any of those artists will and have told me like, no, I actually need you to play this specific bass line that's important for the song, or they've told me the opposite, like, you actually don't need to do that. You can do something else there if you want to. So it's definitely a collaboration.
What's your sense of what someone, especially someone from outside of jazz, when they bring you on board, that they're looking for, that you're kind of bringing to the table, that I guess any number of other bass players for hire aren't?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know if at this point, I don't know. I think most people who are hiring me are not just trying to hire someone who has a jazz background. They're like specifically trying to hire me. So they've probably heard something in the way that I approach melody, for example. I think people have enjoyed, I think, the flexibility I have with things, or the kind of, I think coming from an improvisational background kind of gives me a lot of confidence to try new things, to change things up, which artists often like. And yeah, I think flexibility and also just being able to learn songs really quickly has been a useful skill, I think.
Is that flexibility, is that willingness to change things, is that a constant to a certain extent? And when you're doing a long tour with somebody, do you feel like your role in the music continues to evolve?
I definitely do. I like to think of it like that. I'm always looking for finding new ways to get through a song, or there'll be, like with Jason songs, there'll be bass lines that I've come across, or that I've put in, that'll be like, oh, I really like this one, I want to do this one every time. And then there'll be like little moments where I'm like, is that really the best way to get through that bridge? Like, maybe there's something else I can do. But I'm thinking about that kind of all the time. Just because, I don't know, I like the music to evolve. I don't want the shows to always be the same. And I think a live show should be different from the record. So yeah, I don't know. I enjoy it that way.
I don't think I've heard a lot of people describe it that way, this idea of getting through something. And not obviously not in the sense like, that I want to get finished with the song, but in the sense that it's almost like a math problem, that it's like, what is the best and most creative or perhaps most efficient way to get from point A to point B?
Yeah, it is kind of, yeah, I know what you mean. It is kind of like a challenge, or almost like a game, because I'm thinking about, like, I think when I'm playing bass with other people, or at least in Jason's music to be specific, I'm thinking about, how am I navigating this harmony? Like, how am I fulfilling like a bass function, like kind of grounding the harmony and the rhythm, but also doing that in, for me, like a melodic way. Like, how am I getting from this chord to this chord? How am I leading us into the bridge? How am I leading us back into the chorus? Kind of things like that. It's like really subtle stuff. We're talking about like a couple of notes. Like, it's a bass line. It's not, this like it's subtle, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I'm always thinking about that.
Is there a sense in which the role of the bass in a song like that that this idea of leadership is interesting too, this idea of like, obviously bass is really foundational to this kind of music, of shepherding musicians to other parts of the songs. That, again, that's a really interesting way of contextualizing things.
Well, I kind of meant like shepherding the listener, really. Like, how am I leading the listener from this bridge section to the chorus? And like, is that something that wants to feel like a surprise, or is it something where when I say, where I want it to feel like, oh, the anticipation, oh, we're going into a new section, oh, here we are. Like, how do I frame that for the listener? It's kind of, for the other musicians as well. But yeah, I guess I'm thinking a lot about like, how am I setting up expectations and then either playing into them or going against them?
Certainly, like in most popular music, bass isn't necessarily like out there in the way that like, that guitar is, that it, or even like, to a certain extent, like vocals, of course, but drums as well. It's a really subtle instrument. Like I said, it's a foundational instrument, and it's very interesting to explore the way people interact with it and the role that it has, especially like in a lot of cases, even really great bass players, like you don't even notice that they're there. They're just kind of part of the music.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I have a very biased perspective on that, because I always notice, like that's what I'm listening to. But yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm doing all of this stuff and no one's noticing. Who knows? But I mean,
it's not in vain. It's not in vain. But yeah, it's not flashy necessarily in the same way that other instruments are.
No, that's right. I mean, I think it depends on the music, and like I always want to hear the bass out front. I want to hear the bass mixed really high, like very separated, because I think it's interesting. I think there's no reason why the bass shouldn't be playing parts that are really melodic and singable. Like, that's what I want to do, and my favorite bass players all do that. So I'm kind of like, why not? But I was kind of trying to remember. I think I read something somewhere about rock and roll music being more about like the interaction between the drums and the guitars rather than with the bass, which I think is probably true in a lot of cases. But I say, why not the bass as well? Don't sleep on the bass.
It's always fascinating to me when the bass player writes the song and the bass really does take on a different role, this is kind of an obvious example in jazz, but, Mingus, for example, like Mingus writing a song as a bass player, you just hear a lot more of the bass in the song naturally.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. His songs are very bass focused. Oh, I love it. I don't know. I think in jazz, the bass, oh no, I was just going to say, I think in jazz, the bass is a little more prominent than it can be in some of these other like popular musics. But yeah, that is a good point.
I guess what I'm getting at in a really roundabout way is, and I don't know that you necessarily firsthand have a lot to compare this to. I know that you were a flautist at one point in your life, but how do you feel that having the bass as your foundational instrument that you're effectively writing the songs around impacts your songwriting?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it does impact the songwriting. I mean, I've noticed on this new record, all of the songs do have these very kind of like strong bass lines, I guess, or kind of like, bass lines that stick with you or that you notice. I'm not always starting a song from like what the bass line's going to be, but it's never like a throwaway thing for me. It's like I do need it, just for myself at least. I do need it to be like great, like, I mean, I'm coming from like listening to a lot of like Michelle Digiucello, someone I've been listening to a lot the last 10 years or so. And she has the best bass line. So I'm like, well, why can't every bass line be that good? Like it should be. Like there's no reason for it just to be a throwaway thing, I think. So I think I'm always thinking about that. But
did you study composition?
No, no, I went to school for jazz. And it didn't really have a big compositional element to it. I haven't written a whole. I've dabbled in writing music for maybe the last 10, 15 years, but not really seriously until I put out my first record in 2022. Yeah, but yeah, not a whole lot of composition. And I think the disadvantage, I guess, or maybe it's an advantage and a disadvantage of being a bass player is that you're not like every band needs a bass player. Other people are going to call you to be in their bands. It's like I have a lot of friends who are saxophone players or vocalists, and they have to be so much more proactive about being band leaders and writing music because it's much less likely that someone's going to call them to play a bunch of gigs. If you play,
they have to make their own work in a sense.
Exactly. Yeah, they have to. It's saxophone is not a necessary part of every band for better or for worse. In the way that bass kind of is. So it let me spend a lot of time not having to focus on writing my own music, and writing always seemed daunting to me. So I came to it like, at least I seriously came to it kind of later on, which, yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to kind of figure it out, I think.
Improvisation, if not foundational, at least is like a very useful skill when it comes to sitting down and writing music.
That is definitely true. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think, just being able to kind of explore ideas, mess around. Yeah, it has been helpful. That's certainly true.
You feel like you had to kind of force the process a little bit though when you first started writing songs?
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's all about, for me, it's just always been about tricking myself into writing something. I'm serious. Like, just a lot of like, just spend 1 hour, just like put on a timer for an hour and just try and get any idea down. And then if you don't, and then like I kind of would tell myself like, okay, and then like never open it up again. Just kind of getting used to I guess giving myself permission to make things that were bad was kind of the first hurdle that I had to get over. I'm a real perfectionist. So for me, the hardest thing is just to get any idea out. So I just had a lot of methods to trick myself into getting work done like that.
You didn't go back and revisit any of that? It was really just getting it out in the world and then you were done with it?
No, I went back and revisited some of them. Like, I have a ton that I didn't, but I would go back and revisit a lot of them. I worked in Ableton. So, I was like recording things as I was going and then, yeah, making little loops and stuff like that. And then I'd go back and listen and be like, do I think this has potential? Like a month after having done it, do I think I could turn this into something? Do I think this could be a bridge of a song or something like that? Yes or no? And then I'd work at a little bit more until I got stuck, and then I'd shut it down and then open it up like the next time I was back from tour, and just kind of, it was a slow process of small. Yeah, I think if I started focusing too much on like, I have to finish this song or this song has to be on the record, stuff like that, it got a little too overwhelming. So I was always just trying to keep it in the zone of like, what happens if I can play around with this song for an hour? Like, can I write a better melody? No? Okay, well, that's never mind. Like, I'll do something else,
I think as we established at the top of the conversation, you can and have had a very fruitful career playing not only with other musicians, but playing other people's music. Why did you feel like you really had to force this process? Why was it important that you started writing for yourself?
That's a great question. In that I don't quite know the answer. I don't know. You really got me there. Well, I know. I think I don't know. I think I did kind of have a feeling, or I do feel like I have things to say musically. I think I do believe on some level that I have ideas that are worth exploring and worth showing to people. It was just a process of how do I extract them or how do I realize them. But I think, the first record I put out, Activities, was very much, I was not thinking about making a record or trying to make a record. I was just, I was asked, like I was invited to come in and like spend a day kind of messing around. It kind of fell into my lap, really. And then once I had done that and realized I'm like, oh, I do have these things that I want to express, that I want to say, and also that I have the ability to do it, then I think I kind of just, had the confidence in myself to try and do it again, and to believe that I did have things I wanted to say and I wanted to write. But I'm really just trying to make music that I would want to listen to, I think.
Forgive the overly simplistic question, but when you say an idea, what I mean, it's an obviously very abstract concept, but what is an idea insofar as it's sort of the starting point for a song?
Yeah, I mean, anything, I think just any tiny little fragment of music that is interesting to me, like whether it's an interesting bass line or it's an interesting, like, I did a lot of stuff on drum machine, like if I'm able to make an interesting drum pattern, or just an interesting guitar riff, like really I'm talking about like a tiny fragment, and less kind of like big lofty ideas and more just like really small musical fragments. And like, do I hear that going somewhere else, or do I hear that, is that interesting enough to my ear to try and explore it, to try and take it somewhere, to try, I guess, to try and do something that sounds new.
I will confess, I didn't know your name until I was pitched you, and I listened to your album, and I wanted to talk to you based on that, on hearing something that felt really, just from the outset, very, very, I guess, different from other things that are out there. Is that important for you? Is that important for you to have kind of a unique sound or a unique approach when it comes to your own music?
Well, first of all, thank you. I mean, that's a nice thing to say. I think it is. There's just so much. I mean, there's just so much music being made. I always kind of think like, well, I think about this a lot in terms of like, this is a little bit of a digression, but like playing covers of other people's music. I always kind of think personally, like, you should either do it better than the original or different than the original. Like, there should be some reason to like it. I don't know. I think it should be like better or different, basically. So,
it's like, do I just pick poor performances? Like, am I going to play a Beatles song better than they did?
Well, that's the thing, like, that's, yeah, I've said that, and now I'm already like arguing with myself over whether or not that's even true.
No, you've got to bring something to the table, I think, is what you're getting.
There you go. Yeah, that's a much better way of saying it. Yeah. So I do think, I come from a really maybe unique background, I would say. I didn't listen to like popular music at all until I was in my 20s. I, heard hip hop for the first time when I was in my 20s. So I think finding a way to combine all of the music that I enjoy listening to into something that is different is like kind of a fun challenge for me. But yeah, at the end of the day, I want to make something that like is like unexpected, or, just like makes people either like feel something or think something, or like have a new experience, be like, I've never heard anything like this before. Like that is, I guess, kind of the goal.
How did you manage to avoid hearing hip hop until your 20s? That's impressive.
I don't know, man. I know. Impressive or depressing.
And this is another part of the conversation entirely. I think that ultimately it's kind of an asset to be coming at things from an entirely different angle. But, you were in Adelaide, like you weren't in the boonies necessarily. You were around people.
I was around people. Yes. I don't know. I never like, my family didn't listen to the radio, like not in the house. I don't know. I guess I got into jazz kind of young. I got into jazz when I was about 13, and I'm an obsessive person. I'll get interested in something and then I don't want to hear about anything else. So I was just really focused on that until I was in my 20s. I didn't, yeah, I don't know. I didn't grow up with a lot of popular culture. I didn't really like watch TV. I didn't, yeah, you know, in Adelaide, yes, you're right. It's not the boonies, but it is, you know, I mean, it's isolated from, it's geographically isolated, and it's isolated from American culture in a way. But yeah, I don't know. you know, have always been really self-conscious about that element of my kind of journey in music, about not having listened to so much stuff, about, you know, yeah, just not having heard so much music that everyone else my age kind of grew up with. But I'm trying to see it as an asset, or I'm not see it as an asset, but I'm trying to like lean into the things about that that are really interesting. Like it's interesting to hear. Like I heard, this is a silly example, but I heard the song "Hey Ya" by Outkast for the first time this year, and like I know it's ridiculous, but it's hilarious.
It was just the biggest song in the world when it came out.
I know. And when did it come out? Like I was definitely alive, like, and could have heard it. But and I'd heard Miss Jackson, like that song I knew, but like I heard Hey Ya for the first time like 6 months ago. And like having that experience like in your 30s is crazy. Like for me, you know, like something that everyone grew up with and that I'm like hearing for the first time with like such a deeper understanding of music than I would have had at the time that it came out. Like it's, I don't know, it's something about that is cool. Actually, it feels ridiculous and it's embarrassing in a way, but I'm trying to just take the positive elements from my very sheltered upbringing.
I think that's right. I think that there is like a song like that that's been around for a long time, and that, you know, certainly it's something that I know really well, something that you tend to take for granted, and that just feels like, I mean, that's like such a good song that just feels like it's something that just like existed in the universe, you know, independent of Outkast, just in the ether for, you know, millennia.
Yeah, I guess so. Not for me, but yeah, for everyone else.
I mean, what, and you're able to bring this kind of, you know, fresh set of ears to it in the way that other people can't necessarily.
Yeah, I think I've just been in the, and this still happens to me all the time, you know, especially since starting with Jason, because like some of the guys in that band will be like, what do you mean you've never heard like this song by The Who, you know? It's just like, it's happened.
And you know what? And music guys love that. They love hearing you haven't heard about something and then just like teaching you. And
yeah. And it's kind of, it can be nice and it can be condescending and it can be a lot of things, but I've just been in that situation so many times. I've just always it's like, what do you mean you haven't heard this record? You haven't heard this record? And it used to make me feel so self-conscious and so bad, like I hadn't listened to enough music, or like I was doing something wrong, you know. And I've just decided that like I can't have that relationship with it anymore. Like it's not worth it. It doesn't give me anything positive to kind of feel shamed about not having heard something, because, you know, you could always I could go up to anyone too and you know, find some obscure thing that they hadn't heard and do the same thing. And I don't know. I'm just trying to have a more positive relationship with it, I guess.
I think it's a superpower.
That's sweet. Thank you.
Especially in that world, because the people that you're playing with, like, granted, you're in the same boat. It sounds like you've always wanted to do this thing with your life, but they have as well, and they've been immersed in it for so long that I do think that you're able to bring a fresh perspective to things that they can't necessarily.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think that's true. You know, I guess the other thing is that I've always been in situations where I'm playing with people who are a lot older than me. You know, which has a huge impact on it as well. So
how's that?
Well, it's just, you know, like one of the people I've played with the band that I've played in the most has been with Jeff Parker and Jay Belrose. And those guys are like 20 plus years older than me, you know? So there's always going to be, and they've listened to so much music, and there's always going to be a record where Jeff's like, oh, you've never heard this, oh, you've never heard that, you know, and it's going to be like that, and which is fine, you know, once I started embracing it and just listening to all the records they couldn't believe I hadn't heard, you know, you get to discover all these new things, and it's really cool.
You must be very good at your job, because that is potentially another strike, you know, like that's another thing, right? It's just being like, not having had decades of doing this and coming in and there being this kind of big gap that clearly you're bringing something to the table that in a certain sense is really transcending that.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that must be true. I guess that must be true. You know, I hope I'm also just bringing a great personality and, you know, the dedication and commitment.
I kind of picked up on this like pretty quickly. You know, there's a mention of city pop. Was that something that you got kind of obsessed with at a certain point and started No,
I've never listened to city pop. I haven't listened. That's not a music that I've listened to like deliberately. I think, yeah, it's been interesting to see, you know, the way people are writing about the new record, and they're like, oh, influenced by this, influenced by that. And I'll be like, it's cool that you're hearing all of those things in it, but like, really, I was just listening to like a lot of Chris Cohen and Juana Molina, and then just trying to write a song like that, but with a drum machine, and it came out sounding like city pop, and great, cool, okay, but no, in this case, no.
No, that's very funny, you know, and I wonder how much of this, you know, an impression that I got really listening to the record before I had any context for who you are and what you do is it seems to be of similar mind or occupying a similar space as like a Flying Lotus. I assume that as a bass player, you're like a Thundercat fan, like the rest of us. I don't know. Do you feel a sense of kinship to those guys?
I like their music. I like Flying Lotus. I like Thundercat. Kinship, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to put myself in a, you know, any kind of like conceptual group with those kind of people. But you know, I do think there's a shared like Los Angeles element to the stuff. I to me, you know, my music is very rooted in LA and in this particular time span. So I think there is a connection there, and I certainly you know, yeah, have listened to, like, I would say, like, to me, there's like more of a hip hop influence in it than some of the other things that have been kind of thrown around.
Foundational, similar influences. You know, beyond that, beyond sort of we're coming up an hour, we can close on this, but beyond the obvious geographical implications, what does that mean to make music that's rooted in LA?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm still kind of trying to figure it out. I think, I don't know. I think there's something in, you know, the people that I play with here are all involved in a lot of different projects that are happening here. There's a kind of like diversity of influences that I think that to me feels like a big part of it. You know, a lot of bands tour out of LA, and a lot of the people that I play with have spent a lot of time touring in various bands. But then you know, it's definitely a city where you can do a lot of different things. And I think those things all kind of come through. But I think it's also just like a specific, you know, my experience in LA has been very much tied to this bar we used to play in ETA, you know, this band with Jeff Parker, Jay Belrose, Josh Johnson. It's like a very specific, small kind of, it's community of people, and like the kind of the music that we listen to, the people that we all individually play with. So it's kind of almost like a micro, it's LA, but it's like a micro scene in LA, I guess, if that makes sense.
It's like this nucleus that everything you do kind of starts to build out from, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's definitely been my experience of it, I would say.